Hello, good morning, and welcome back to another webinar Wednesday. My name is Selena Dorme. I'm the Engagement Coordinator with the First Nations Public Service Secretariat. I'm happy to be back moderating as I've been away for a little while. I am from the Tsleil-Waututh Nation here in North Vancouver, but I also want to recognize our neighboring nations also on this unceded territory of the Squamish and the Musqueam peoples. For today's webinar, is titled Reconciliation in a Time of Uncertainty. We're joined with Chief Dr. Robert Joseph, Hereditary Chief of the Gwawaenuk First Nation and renowned peace builder and advocate for reconciliation. This will be a 45-minute session, which includes just a presentation from Chief Joseph on the impacts of COVID-19 on reconciliation in Canada and the opportunities emerging from this crisis for new ways of working together and being together. So thank you so much, Chief Dr. Robert Joseph, for joining us. I think this is of course, an important topic, and I'm really just pleased for you to be here. And make sure that you submit those questions. This man is very knowledgeable and has some wonderful things to say. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, Chief, if you don't mind, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Okay. Greetings, all my relatives. Nimuyut, we are all one. And that's a message I really hold on with every part of my being, the idea that we are all one. So it's really a core value for me and a core value for Reconciliation Canada. Today, I'm talking to you from our home on the Squamish Nation unceded territories. I always want to acknowledge that. And I'm so happy to be with all of you today. I wish I could see your faces and I could see your eyes, and as we have this discussion this morning. I want to tell you just a little bit about myself. I'm not formally educated, but I've done a lot of things in my life that give me a volume of lifelong experience that has allowed me to have some voice and some persuasion in reaching out to other people and asking other people to walk with each other, to walk with me, to walk with you, and to improve the human condition, especially for our children. I got into this work because that was my entire focus one time, having suffered 11 years in a residential school and seeing my childhood sort of just evaporate into nothingness. I couldn't allow that to happen anymore without trying to do something. So that's the basis for me being on this webinar today. This is a really challenging time. I've never seen a moment like this. It's been a long, long time since I've felt the way I do about COVID-19 and then the events that are happening south of us in the USFA. And I think to myself, how are we going to get past this moment? And we are going to get past this moment. We always have. Mankind has found a way, especially Indigenous people. We have found a way through genocide and colonization and residential schools. We have found a way to be here this moment, this time, addressing those things that have confounded us and caused a great deal of harm and hurt, suffering. And I want to just say it to you again, we are going to get past this moment. And the secret to that is because we are one. I have she passed away. My grandmother was my hero. She was my father's mother. She would always say, there'd be a pause. I am worth nothing, my precious one, without you. And I really believe that too. Between us, you and I, and other like-minded people who care about each other. We're going to get past this moment, and we're going to rebuild, and we're going to move beyond our fear and confusion and sense of loss. And we're going to come to a new place, not the old place, a new place, with these ideas that this is a moment of awakening for humankind, for Indigenous people, and that all of us are taking a pause as we speak right now, taking a pause and thinking about what on earth is happening everywhere. And suddenly we realize that we're not going to beat this pandemic unless we all work together. And we're not going to work together unless we accept the very idea that it starts with self, that you have to step up as an individual where you live and work and play and say, I'm responsible. So in terms of COVID, then you isolate, you stay home, you wear a mask. You know, all those recommendations we've been living with now for 3 months, they're real and they are our power, and we've seen the impact of that. So without you, we can't beat this pandemic. That's how powerful you are. But the essence of that message is that even though we start with self, if we build out, we become more powerful than we think. I love to tell people about how powerful we are, you and I, that even though we're just a small, infinitesimal human being somewhere, so small compared to the universe, that when our ancestors tell me that we're a part of the universe, we can't be that small, can we? Take a look, you're part of all of this. And I think the message is that we've got to find ways to empower ourselves, to believe in ourselves, to believe in each other, and that we're in this together. And even in the long term, when we get beyond COVID-19, when we begin to look at the deep issues that divide us and separate us, like racism, like what's going on in the States now, we're going to be well equipped because now we have a consciousness that is deeper and wider and more focused on not only just a problem, but how we can get beyond those barriers and divisions. And we actually learn to live out love rather than hatred. And so in this moment of COVID, and then watching our neighbors down south, I want you to know that I believe in you, that you have so much power, that you can start at home, talking to your own children, talking to your siblings, maybe talking to your mom and dad, but talking about what matters most. Love and kindness, compassion, understanding, those things matter most. I'm not saying that economy doesn't matter. It does, of course it does. But I think we have to place the emphasis on things that bring out the best in all of us. And so in this time of COVID, we in Reconciliation Canada are, just like all of you on this webinar, isolated. We're not able to, like we always have for the last 5 years, been able to reach out into the community, actually travel and have face-to-face emotional interchanges that create understanding, that create shifts of consciousness. No, we can't do that now. So we find ways, like this way this morning. I never thought that I would ever be on a webinar talking to people I can't see. I wish I could see you, but I hope you feel my love. Just because you're on this webinar, it says something to me about who you are, that you care and you want to make a difference and you want to be involved. So we're going to have to use technology in its full force to make sure, and it's going to be even more powerful because you could eventually reach more people. And once we get used to this, it'll become part of the new way of moving forward. Next week, I'm talking to 100 people in India, just about what we're talking about, sharing ideas about what we can do and how we can go about promoting and manifesting love in the lives of all people, big and small, politicians or not, or otherwise. And I think it's always been a matter, and these two elements are really important. Being able to communicate. And once you're able to communicate, creating relationships. That's the key. When I was young and I was a young radical, I kind of like to used to think I was a young radical. I'd heard people, and I can't remember who this great activist was. The medium is a message, he said. And I thought, gee, this guy's crazy, but I get it. So now we have all of this at our disposal, all of this technology, and in this trying time, we can't do the things that we've always done. We become creative and innovative, and we grab every instrument within our reach to create the communication and building and connection to relationships that'll propel us forward. And then when the clouds lift and the day becomes brighter, we have already this connection between each other. And then we can return to some level of, I don't know, normal, I don't know about normal, but some practices that we used to do that we're so fond of, and we'll be able to do that as well. So I think it's about you and I recognizing that we have it within us to be engaged, to be involved, and that whatever the emphasis and focus and outcomes that we desire in our lives are, that we can do that, even with COVID being the fearful antagonist that it is. For a while, I was so scared to go outside. I really wanted to live on. I'm 80 years old, by the way, but I didn't want to die yet. I thought, no, I got some things to do yet and some things to say. So I was upset that I had to isolate, but I knew that I had to do that if I wanted to be around longer and do the kind of work that all of you so love to do, lifting people's spirits up, cheering other people on, engaging and giving advice and empowering others. One of the things that I mentioned earlier was, in all the work that I've ever done with Indigenous people, one of the underlying basic objectives was to make sure that whatever I did and whatever I said in the effort of trying to help others, that it would have to be done in a vein of empowering people to do those things after we've done the original arrangement. So I think as we live in chaos and fear and despair, we need to remember that we're not alone. People around the globe are having the same feelings, having the same fears, having the same confusion. And we can only get through it if we know that at the end of the day, you and I and other people, wherever they are going to continue to stand together, to speak up together, to work together, to elevate everybody's level of knowledge and understanding. So COVID, I think in the long term is going to deepen our question about what do we do with COVID? Are we going to let COVID take us somewhere? Or are we going to take our experience with COVID somewhere and elevate the intention of those things that we want to achieve? And I think I think we're going to be, generally speaking, a more enlightened humanity. And I think there's going to be a lot of transformation that we can't yet see that will begin to evolve. And for a while, for a brief while, there will be a gentleness and a calm throughout humanity. And what we need to do when that happens is engage in that and keep up the dialogue around that. That peace within is not that elusive, and it belongs to all of us, and we should have the right to reach out and achieve that kind of peace. And I know that all of you work in your communities, and sometimes you think you're all alone, but you're not alone. You know, the people that you've been working with and helping throughout the years, they're with you. They appreciate you. Sometimes we just don't know how to say thank you. So in this moment, I say thank you on their behalf to all of you good people on this line who've been doing so much work. And I look forward to some questions now, I think. Any kind of questions, I'll be happy to hear them out and give my perspective.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chief Joseph. I really am just, there's a lot of great comments. We have a few questions in the queue, but your words just, they really resonate with me, and I know that they do with a lot of our viewers. So I'm going to go ahead and open up our Q&A here. And our first question is, what group or event are you talking to in India? It sounds very interesting.
Oh yeah, it's a peace group in India, and their interest is in me sharing a little bit about our residential school experience here in Canada and the evolution to a truth commission, and outlining some of the, and there's been some great work that's happened as a result of survivors telling their truth, the commission being established and creating a volume of that truth. And then civil society responding. We don't hear much. We hear a lot of the criticism and shortcomings of government not doing what they should do, but we don't hear much about, there are Canadians across this country, everywhere, making attempts at contributing to reconciliation. When the Truth Commission was first submitted, shortly after that, there was a national survey that was conducted, and 7 out of 10 Canadians said they supported reconciliation, in spite of the characterization of genocide. That was huge, but it's still growing. There was a subsequent poll, and it said that more than 8 out of 10 Canadians supported reconciliation for the same reasons, and that meant there were 84% to be exact. And I've been crisscrossing this country, not during COVID, of course, talking to big developers, business, faith-based groups, governments, just all kind of people. And everywhere I've been, ordinary people in their, even in their corporate offices, are struggling with how do we get engaged in this reconciliation? So beneath the surface in Canada, there's a real concern, and there's some real discussion going on about how it is that we can create a future together that's more equal and just, which means that we'd be living up to our aspirations as a country of equality and stuff like that. And so those things are happening. And in India, they have, and I didn't know this, have residential schools. And they think that some of the intention behind those regimes are similar to the intention that schools had in Canada, which was to assimilate little Indian kids and totally have them disregard their history and their culture, the values of their ancestors, and their entire worldview is just sort of ripped from underneath them. So the people in India want to do this, have a webinar, me talk a little bit about that, and have some Q&A about where they might go. You know, in states, I'm watching this race issue unfolding. I think that they've been struggling with that for so long. There's been really no progress or very little progress. And I think what's missing is that they got to go back to the beginning, back to slavery, back to all of the attempts at genocide, including genocide against the Native Americans. And they got to deal with that history. And then once they've done, but those people have to step up and say, here's the real impact. Like nobody in Canada really cared or couldn't emphasize until I made a connection and hearing through the stories of those survivors. So I think that the more we share of our experiences and how we harm each other, the more others can recognize the fallacy in their own lives that they might even be unintentionally harming people. And yet human suffering is so monumental that we can't afford not to be looking in that direction.
Right. Thank you so much. The next question actually kind of touches on the issues going on in the States. This person's comment says, these are definitely trying times and we have benefited by slowing down and understanding the importance to each of us, which is family and keeping everybody safe. But it's been 13 weeks. It's very frustrating to see others, especially the government, using COVID as an excuse for not doing the right thing by Indigenous people. So are we being too nice? Do Indigenous people need to take kind of a little bit more steps? Not, I wouldn't say similar to what's going on in the States, but as far as protests go, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we have to be more organized and really have a clear, consistent message that's told every day so that people can't forget. Because it's so easy to hear the horrific stories one day and then it's done. And then you get to become comfortable again and complacent. What we need to do is to be able to go into all of our communities. When I say all of our communities, as Canadians, we need to go into those communities and talk around kitchen tables, town halls, and in different schools, and talk about our horrific history together. Because once, and especially children, if you can reach the children, they grow up understanding that they're not going to be like their parents. They're going to be caring, they're going to be empathetic, and they're going to be decent. They want to be decent. Every generation wants to be decent. And the funny thing is that every parent wants their child generation to be decent, but we get lost in the process. And it's because I think that the message gets lost somewhere and we become complacent and we focus too much on material wealth and well-being, prestige, and other things like that. I think we have to, and maybe it's in our schools that we start this, but incorporate again the human values that are so essential for civil society to embrace so that you can maintain peace and balance and harmony and a real sense of that interconnectedness between all of us.
I completely agree. Thank you so much for that. The next question is, in these times of reconciliation during COVID, social media is a great place to organize, to find information. Who are the top 5 people, in your opinion, that are kind of leading the way on social media, if you happen to know, or just in general, the top 5 people kind of leading the way in reconciliation?
Yeah, you know what? I got to make a confession first. In 1970s, in the 70s, I was sort of young yet. And this is part of the confession I don't like, but I became an Indian agent for the government. I was a district manager, right? So I had about 25 people working under me in a big budget, $18 million a year. For that time, it was big. And there I was running this operation. And just then, they were introducing technology. And so I got a pink circular from Ottawa. They said, read this, be familiar with it. We want all of your staff to be totally and completely effective and efficient with this new technology. So I gathered all my staff. I'll say, listen up, everybody. Here's the pink slip, and I read the pink slip. But as for me, I said, I'm not going to be a part of this technology. I refuse to, because it'll spell the death of humanity. Eventually, it'll destroy us. So, of course, I've regretted that all my life, right? So I'm not a techie. So I'm not as familiar with all, and they're brilliant. People on these things are brilliant. And I know how effective it is because I watch them to observe it. So I don't know who the best are. I really could, but they must be everywhere, right? It's so instant, and right. you can be an expert, and if you know how to type, even maybe you can become an expert or something. Sorry, I can't answer that question.
That's okay. I was actually going to say maybe you are going to go viral. You're going to be on YouTube, and your words are they're so amazing, and they strike with everybody. And so you are going to be the next thing trending on social media. Okay, the next question is, how do we move out of emergency or contingency planning and forward into visioning, making a space for people to create the future they want for themselves and their communities?
You know, in this time when we're still in quarantine or isolation, and we're not able to gather in public spaces together, and there's a sense that there's a degree of our freedom being compromised or sacrificed or something like that. And so what we're doing, I hear people every day doing this Zoom stuff. People are meeting, people are talking. And I think it's even more permanent as a process because it's on record. Once you're there, it's on record. And I think that it's going to elevate a sense of accountability for everybody to each other. That when you say something, it better be the truth because it's on the screen here. And so I try really hard when I speak everywhere, and if I'm ever interviewed either by students doing papers or journalists, and they say, is that off the record? And I say, no, everything I have to say, I do say rather, is my truth. So you write it. If you heard it from me, it's yours to write about. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yes, no, thank you very much. The next question is, let's see. I'm worried that our leaders will seize on our fear and we will slide into our old normal because it is too comfortable. How do we keep reaching the people whose hearts and minds are suddenly open, who right now understand our interconnectedness because they can't help it, before they close up again?
You know, narrative is really important. A long time ago, where I come from, when they had the anti-potlatch law, the authorities swept down in a little village called Village Island, and they were holding this huge winter potlatch. And the RCMP and the Indian agent and other authority figures swooped down on the community, identified a lot of what do you call it? People that tattletale on others. Identified them and charged a whole number of people in our group with offenses against the potlatch law. And actually 26 people went to jail. Others bargained and forfeited their treasures, masks and drums and other regalia. And when it was all said and done years later, when our group began their fight to repatriate our sacred objects, there was a documentary made, and this old man who went to jail, he's sitting there and they asked him, what did you think of all this? And he said, everybody on earth has a story to tell. And I really got it. I got it when I watched that video. If we stop telling our story, that will stop the message. And then not only does just complacency sink in, we just simply normalized again the past and its history. And so the message has to be sustaining. It always has to be clear and succinct, especially because that's what people hold in their minds, not some long dissertation about the injustice and all of those other things. But if you can capture and describe the horror and experience of humanity in briefer terms, it's going to be remembered, and people are going to want to carry that forward. You know.
Thank you so much. The next question is, have you thought of preparing material for the Canadian education system so that your words and wisdom can be shared in schools for children to hear and learn? It would be very meaningful truth and ensure that children have a strong foundation.
I think generally speaking that across this country, the professional educators everywhere are working really hard to make sure that the wisdom and the knowledge of the ages and those values that propel us forward, that speak to one creation, one creator, one humanity, and that indeed we're interconnected, but that comes with responsibilities of creating harmony and balance and peace. We've got to keep talking about those. And I'm not a guru or anything. I want to be, but I'm not. So I try to talk as best I can in simple ways to make sure that I don't lose the message, right? And that once I hold it, then it's my responsibility to share it wherever I go. I think that's really important.
It's definitely important, and we would be more than happy to have you back to share again on multiple occasions if you'd like.
I'm writing a book right now, by the way.
Oh,
and I'm thinking about all these questions, thinking about the question you just asked, and I think it's important. And what's really important to me is that I'm not anybody. I'm not iconic. I'm not educated. But I'm somebody who grew up from the ranks of despair and brokenness and addiction and harm, and found my voice. I think that's so important. And that's why I would speak about those things from my voice, because every voice is legitimate and valid, and every voice should be heard, right?
I completely agree. You're very humble. I definitely think that your book would also resonate with a lot of people. Everybody has a truth, you know, and it's not everybody has the ability to speak their truth, and some people are really gifted with that. And so you're leading the way by just everything's on the record. Everything is true that comes out of your mouth, and that may not be as simple for others. So thank you so much for that. I was going to move on to the next question.
I just want to say a few closing comments to all of our participants. I've been really honored. I wish I could see your faces, but I've been so honored to speak to you all, to share my thoughts. And more than anything, I would have wanted to hear yours, because it's in our togetherness that we really grow stronger and can move forward collaboratively in ways that make a tsunami of a difference. Over and above what we do at home every day. Those are really important. And we got to bring it all together. Like how powerful is love if it's expressed by more than one individual soul? When you get all of us standing together and we're screaming from the rooftops, I love you, then it has such a powerful persuasion behind it. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yes, no problem. We have a couple minutes left if you're okay with answering one or two more questions. Is that okay?
That's my ego. I said, yeah.
Okay. So the next question is, do you think COVID-19 has shown us how Indigenous people are less engaged with each other? There seems to be strife amongst those who live on reserve versus off reserve, those in the north versus those in the south, those who return to land versus those who have lost their traditional learnings.
You know what COVID-19 has done for all of us? It has, for a brief second, given us a snapshot of where we are, of the thoughts and the ideas that separate us, of the thoughts and ideas that bring us together. And we're really, we typify all of humanity. It's a moment of confusion, and we reach for those things, of course, that inspire us. And we point out those things that are problematic. And it's a natural human reaction, I think. But what I do know is this, that after COVID-19, and we think deeply about how we felt during this time, not only about ourselves, but our family and the community we live, but with the world around us, that we're going to see it a little differently. That somehow there was a breakthrough in the idea that one creation includes all of us. And it's really hard sometimes in our politics to espouse that, because it's going against what we're trying to legally reestablish as being First Nations, right? So if you go too far, then you almost seem like you're arguing against it, but it's further from the truth. I think when we reach lasting, sustaining agreements between each other, whether they're treaties or other instruments of agreement or consent, that they're going to be different, because they're going to be embedded in this idea of spirituality. They won't be focused on the legality. They won't be focused on the politics. Of course, they'll be made by it, but deep down, we're going to be agreeing to things together because we agree that as human beings, we all deserve the love and mutual respect for each other that should exist anyway. So it's going to be different. It's going to be better. And I think COVID, the silver lining, I think I said in the front, will manifest. And we're going to pick up the pieces, and we're going to think about reconciliation and move forward with this new level of consciousness to guide us forward. Most of us, maybe some will be the same. There always are. But for those who are willing, we got to cheer each other on, right?
One last question, and it really speaks to a lot of the viewers as they're First Nation public servants and also from the federal government, different levels of government. So it says, what advice or ideas do you have for federal public servants and First Nation public servants who work together to learn from each other and support each other? Speaking as a federal public servant, I appreciate we still have a lot to learn in terms of building knowledge of our shared history and Indigenous cultures.
Yeah, you know what? I've been in public service a few times. I was a district manager, local government advisor, community development worker way back in the 60s. And I always struggled as an Indigenous person to be working inside a colonial structure that seemed to be so hated. But it was, but at all of that time, I thought, no, I want to be on this inside, seeing what it is that I can do to impact change within the structure and the system, and to see what I could do to deepen the communication between Indigenous people and that branch of government. And so it's really important. Here's what I really want to tell all the Indigenous workers of federal government, that you're a public servant. Why are you a public servant? It's because you want to be of service. And in this instance, you may have wanted to be of service to elevate the conditions at home and everywhere across the country. to bring about equality and justice and respect and integrity, love to our families and communities. That's who you are. You have to have the courage of your convictions to stay there and work as hard as you can, breathing life into those intentions that you have about making a system work that hasn't really worked that well in the past, but helping now to improve how it impacts the lives of others. So don't don't be embarrassed, don't be ashamed of being public servants. It's a very personal choice. And when it comes to personal choice, I value that, I treasure it more than you know. And I think you should do that for yourselves if you're Indigenous public servants. Be proud of who you are, be proud of what you're doing. You're acting on courage and you're acting on faith and you're doing what it is that you can do. The flip side of that is you could do nothing and just be a critic and nothing changes ever, you know. So that's sort of
Thank you so much. I think you've given a lot of people a lot to think about when they return to work or continue to work from home and try to dig their way out of isolation and kind of get back to the swing of things. You've given a lot of people to think about how they might do that differently and or do it above and beyond, or how to encourage other people to join them in doing things a little bit differently and having that different perspective. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to get through all the questions. There's also a lot of just wonderful, nice comments. For example, one of the comments is, your guidance has taught me how to find peace, not only with others, but within myself. You are a gift, and I am thankful for everything that you do to help so many people. That's just one of the nice comments that we received in the chat and submitted in the Q&A. So thank you all so much. We have over 100 people watching right now. So this is a really been an interesting and exciting and eye-opening webinar. So thank you again, Chief Dr. Robert Joseph, for joining us. There are just a couple of announcements that I have before we wrap up. We have the First Nations Public Service Secretariat has a forum coming up on June 18th. It's called Managing New Realities. You can find information about it on our website, on Instagram and social media. I don't think registration is quite open for that yet. Maybe it is. I've kind of been out of the loop because I've been on leave for a little while, but you could definitely find more information about that on our website. There is going to be a survey that you're going to get via email right after this webinar, so please complete that survey. It helps us to define the topics for future webinars, and that's based on what you want to see. So please fill out that survey after the webinar closes. Chief Dr. Robert Joseph, anything else you'd like to say before we close out?
No, I just want to wish everybody a really good post-COVID, that we're going to be re-inspired to change the world and make it a better place. That's it. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I raise my hands to you. And thank you everybody for watching. This will be available on YouTube, so stay tuned for that. Thanks so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.